Good morning. My name is Danielle Worley. I'm an author writing under the pen name Lucy H. Delaney. I'm also a follower of Christ and currently a caregiver for my grandmother who's 91 years old and has mid-stage dementia, which is why I'm doing this video. I did a YouTube search for sermons to encourage or support or give direction to people who are caregivers, any kind of caregiver, and found very little guidance or encouragement. There were some for nurses, nothing just for family who's caring for somebody with special needs or vulnerable or elderly adult or even children, really. And I dug deeper and I did find some good words and some good wisdom that was out there. A sermon that didn't necessarily encourage or guide me, but reminded me about why I am doing this and taking care of my grandmother. But the point and the purpose of this chat, I guess, Bible study maybe, is to share what I have learned from the Word and also to let you know that you're not alone if you're taking care of a caregiver, of a loved one. And to also try to maybe give you some wisdom, help you see what the Word says based off of my own search and study at this difficult time in my life. So I'm going to take a sip of coffee, we're going to pray, and then we'll start. So, first of all, Heavenly Father, I pray that this will go out to the people who are struggling and in need of help and encouragement like I am right now. God, I pray that as I continue my study, you would guide me with what to do with my grandma. I pray, as I have prayed over and over again to you, to please show her mercy. Please give her as much dignity as possible on her way out. Please take her home to her reward. She's been faithful to you. God, I would ask that it be peaceful, that she not suffer any pain, and that you would meet her in her reward in heaven with you. Lord, I pray for strength and for endurance for everyone who is caregiving for a loved one with dementia, with Alzheimer's, with special needs, with physical ailments. I just pray that you would give us strength, that you would be our source and our life-giving water that we need through this time, and that we would be kind and loving and honor those that we love and are caring for. In your Son, Jesus Christ's name, I pray, amen. All right, so I am not a pastor. I am an author. I generally do not write nonfiction, although I'm starting to do that. Pen name is Lucy H. Delaney if you want to find my works, but I feel that some sort of sermon is necessary that people can find. My grandpa was a pastor. My grandma, who I'm taking care of, is a pastor's wife. My dad is an ordained minister, and he preaches at Friendship Haven Church in Cumberland, Maryland. I believe it's Cumberland, Maryland. So I come from a line of pastors. I've heard lots of sermons. I have my pastor that I listen to, Pastor Greg Rochelle, because I'm at life.church online. I'm an online attendee. And then I have a little local church that I'm starting to go to with my grandkids when my grandma will get up out of bed. So if you haven't guessed it already, in these first 4.5 minutes, my grandma controls my life. Every minute of it is dictated by whether she wakes or sleeps, by whether she has a caregiver, or if I'm taking care of her, whether we have the money to get a caregiver so I can get out and go do something with friends or work or whatever, or with my grandkids. My grandma controls my life right now. It hasn't always been like this. She was diagnosed with dementia in 2017. This is now 2022. She was a little bit off for about 6 months before that, but everybody in the family just kind of blew it off until we couldn't anymore. Then we moved her into independent living, and after about a year in independent living, it was clear that she couldn't, independent senior living, she couldn't do that. So we moved her into an assisted living facility, and there are still issues with that facility, but they pretty much misled us to believe that after she privately paid for 2 years, she would be able to transition to Medicaid. That was not the case. It was never the case, and we were repeatedly misled to believe that. So if you are putting your loved one into an assisted living facility, it doesn't matter what kind of medical emergency you're trying to get your loved one out of. It doesn't matter how urgent the situation is. Read the paperwork. Do not believe a thing they say, especially if it's Bonaventure Senior Living. They misled us verbally to believe that my grandma could stay there, that she would transition to Medicaid, and it was not true. So what happened was, as she was living in independent care, on the independent care side, she overdosed on Tums. She can't remember what medication she's taking. She was forgetting to take her heartburn medication. She has reflux really bad. It's very uncomfortable for her. She wasn't taking her heartburn medicine. And so naturally, she just took a Tums when she felt uncomfortable. And she ended up overdosing, throwing off her balance, and ended up in the hospital for a couple of days, actually. And this was in 2018. 2018, yes. So my aunt and uncle took her to the hospital. They would not let her go back to independent care. Her level of care was at a point where she needed more supervision and more assistance. So the hospital would not discharge her to us. We believed that the transition, because we had been told when we moved into Olympic Place, Bonaventure Senior Living Facility, that she would be able to transition when the time came to assisted living, and then she would be able to stay there as long as she could pay for the 2 years. And we had carefully budgeted her money to get her to the 2 years. And the transition happened faster than we expected. We couldn't get her out of the hospital until she was for sure in a supervised environment. And so my aunt, my uncle, my husband, and I had spoken with the directors of the facility a number of times, had been assured that after she private paid, she could be into Medicaid, signed those papers from what we thought was independent living care into assisted living care. And one of those papers also said that they did not provide Medicaid services. I signed it because I was trying to get my grandma out of the hospital. I didn't read all of the 15, 20 pages of paperwork that were in their lease and caregiving agreements. The person that I was speaking to verbally told my husband and I that she would be able to transition. So it was very, very inappropriate, very misleading, but they've got my signature on that paperwork. So come time for my grandma's money to be all out, about 4 months into the situation, I started to tell the senior living facility that my grandma would be out of money, what was the process to get her into Medicaid. I started that in November of 2019. Yeah, because 2020 was COVID. So in November of 2019, I let them know that she was going to be out of money soon. What did we do? Didn't hear anything from them. I'm about 3 hours away. I tried to call when I would go over to visit my grandma. I tried to speak to a director who was never in the office or was always busy or for some reason couldn't get a hold of me. In December, I believe it was, I started to email I tried to repeatedly call. I tried to speak to someone, still no answer. In January, this was the second to last month or the last month that she had money to pay for her rent and caregiving. I waited outside the facility door until the director, who was in the office, would open the door and speak with me. And my husband, who's a much larger and convincing man than me, was also with me that time. And so we got in, and what I was told by the assistant director was, "We didn't know what to do with people like you." And I said, "What do you mean, people like me?" And she said, "There's no Medicaid services at this facility." And that was it. They didn't help us anymore after that until I threatened to bring up a lawsuit, which I'm having a difficulty finding a lawyer that will represent us because they've got my signature right there on that paper. But at the point when I said that I was going to try to get some legal counsel, the facility sent me a list of Medicaid appropriate facilities in the area, and that was the extent of their care for my grandma, or their assistance in finding her Medicaid. And as we all know, 2020 was the beginning of the COVID nightmare that we all endured and couldn't wake up from and are barely starting to get out of now. My grandmother is in Snohomish County, which is very close to where the very first outbreak of COVID in the United States happened, in King County, where 30 some elderly individuals passed away in a retirement facility. So we had this financial crisis, and we were also afraid that we were going to lose my grandmother to isolation in the facility. My grandma, part of my grandma's personality for forever is she has felt alone. Her dad passed away when she was a casualty of World War II. He was in the Aleutian Islands treating people. He was a conscientious objector, so they put him in the medic fields. And there were some chemical uses up there. A disproportionate amount of the men ended up with leukemia. So he came home, he passed away in the hospital, a casualty of World War II. For that, my grandmother has felt abandoned and alone her whole life because her dad was her primary caretaker, because her mom left her and her family when she was little. She had no brothers or sisters, so our family was very concerned that the isolation that would happen in the facility would not be good for her. We were also very afraid that she wouldn't be treated well because she no longer had money to pay for her care. She could not cover the rent and the caregiving services. So we were really afraid, because of her personality, because of her lack of payment, and because of the COVID crisis itself, she would be alone. So our family made a decision to have a caregiver that we had privately going in to help her out with a long-term care insurance policy, to take her out of the facility, like physically walk her out of the facility, and we moved her into a 3-bedroom apartment. I was working at home, and I was able to stay in her home with her and work and be the primary caretaker, and I would work in one room while she went about her day. And then in the evenings, I would have some relief help because she had the long-term care policy. So at first it worked pretty well. I was able to work at home. We had help so that I had free time and a different place to go. And as her needs progressed, she couldn't be alone in her home. On my house, I married a mountain man, and he lived on 20 acres up on top of a mountain, which is gloriously wonderful for my soul. Not a safe place for an elderly little old lady to get up and down the mountain from. So we made a decision to move in with her. And at that point, it started to become very challenging to take care of her. Not because she's angry or violent. her personality is just very persnickety, I guess is what I could say. She'll pick at you because she wants something done, and of course she's got dementia, so if she wants it done, she wants it done, and it gets stuck in her head, and she will repeat it over and over and over again, usually until a caretaker breaks and does whatever the thing is that she wants to do, no matter how irrational it is or not. Or we've learned that there are some things, if she can't see it, she won't remember it, so we can physically remove something from her line of sight, and it will be out of her mind as well. But I was not getting any breaks, and if we did have a caregiver in the evening, then we had to leave our living situation to get a break, which is sometimes exhausting too, to always have to go and not just to be able to chill. So April before last, so the April of 2021, my husband and I ended up buying another house with a lower level where she has her own apartment, her own bedroom, her own bathroom, and then we have the upstairs up here. So it's given us some break, some peace from being directly in the same spaces with each other. So that's been good. And then the long-term care insurance ran out, so we were down to just the money that she had to take care of herself. And then because of COVID mandates, I was a conscientious objector to that and would not turn in a card to the state of Washington, so I lost my job. And my husband also lost his job. So we lost the opportunity for me to work at home and to be able to take care of her. By the grace of God, we struggled through 2 months. My husband was out of work, then he went back to work because I have to take care of my grandma. And because caregiving is so expensive, it was a huge challenge to try to find work for me. It was extremely difficult to find a job where I was making any money. So there are young families out there, or families with children in daycare, and your daycare bill is $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month, depending on how many kids you have. Care for my grandmother, just for me to work, if I worked regular hours when she was awake, is $16 to $20 an hour. An hour. There's no way I can work a regular scheduled job and make any sense of it. So I had to find a job that was very early in the morning. So I start at 7 o'clock. I get off at 3 o'clock. I get here at 4 o'clock, and so I can manage that chunk of the evening. There's little money left over for any kind of free time for me. So that comes out of our pocket, and our money is less because I've had to adjust my schedule, working part-time, and don't make what I used to make. So I kind of am at a breaking point, and 20 minutes in, you're getting the sermon. So I will remember that, not the sermon, the Bible study. I am not a teacher, I am not a preacher, I do not want that weight on my shoulders. So I'm going to make a note that it's 18 minutes into the video that the Bible study starts. Okay. So the reason for the Bible study, the reason that we're here, is because I'm at a breaking point. I have very limited help and free time. My husband has been amazingly, overwhelmingly supportive of this whole process, but the more of a challenge it is for me, the harder it is for him to endure as well. He can't provide any of the physical care that she needs. It is undignified. So he's not able to help with any of the caregiving, although he and my son will sit with her when she doesn't need any care, when she just needs supervision, so that I can get out. But that's not us having time together. And so it's really become a struggle for me, which has made my primary support person questioning if this is the right thing to do, because it's such a strain on me because I'm not getting any free time. So we're at this point where I'm trying to decide, do we put my grandma back in a home, one that does take Medicaid? There's a very long wait list for that, and we need to find something closer to my family. Is that biblical? Is that right in God's eyes? What does God expect from us? I took my grandma in because I made a promise to my grandpa when he passed, and I made a promise to God that she wouldn't be alone, because that is her biggest fear in life, is to be alone. And I don't want her to be alone. And when she was in the independent care, when she was living independently in her own house after my grandpa died, she would always say she was lonely when I called to talk to her on the phone. Always, always, always would say she was lonely. When she was in independent care, when she was in the assisted living, if you would call or go to visit her, she would say that she was lonely. Since she's been living here, since she's had constant supervision, she doesn't much say she's lonely anymore. As long as she sees somebody within 10 to 15 minutes. Any longer than that, she thinks she's alone. So I feel horrible about thinking about putting this little old lady who is afraid of being alone into a place where she more than likely is going to feel alone again. But at the same time, I'm tired. I'm tired. This has been 2.5 years of taking care of her, and I'm tired. So my primary source of wisdom and strength is from God. I've got my Bible. I wish it was like the Old Testament, or that I was in tune enough with God to have a face-to-face conversation with Him. I always tell people that my Bible study in the morning, I have coffee with Jesus. I sit down with my Bible. I have my coffee. We spend our time together. So this is my time with the Lord. And people say, listen to the Lord, wait on the Lord. I have my prayer journal. I pray. I have the Bible, which I believe is the Lord somewhat speaking to me. But I've never heard God's voice. I've never actually had Him sit next to me like my husband sits next to me, and when I don't know what to do, fall into a physical form and hear Him just hold me, hear His breath and His heartbeat, give me that assurance, or give me guidance. The only thing that I have is me praying and pretty much asking, what am I supposed to do, and not hearing anything. Or me searching for a sermon, asking my pastors, or looking to the Word of God. And as I started at the beginning of this to share, the pastors in my life, the pastors on YouTube, are silent in this area. There's not a whole lot for caregivers out there. So then my next go-to is the Word. What does the Word say about caregiving? Particularly in my situation, caring for a widow. So there are a whole lot of layers here to caregiving, and I'm not going to be able to hit on all of them. As I was doing this study, it occurred to me that there are people who are taking care of the infirm, people who are physically ill or sick, or mentally ill or sick. And they are also vulnerable, and that is a completely different category. And as I was looking for hope and help and direction and wisdom in the Word, it occurred to me that there are a lot more scriptures about caring for the widow and the fatherless than there are about the paralyzed dude who sat out at the pool waiting to get into the water in the Bible. What did his family do? Did they just put him by the pool during the day and go do their job and then come back for him? Was he on his own? How about the blind people, the one with epilepsy? We see what Jesus did. We see the healing that they got, but we don't necessarily see what the care was like for them, or what our command or directive should be in caring for them. So I am sorry that I don't have the words for you from the Bible, and I wish that was out there for you. And I'm sure somebody has done that, or there's hope, or maybe, hopefully, you can do the study and you can find it. But the caregiving that I'm looking at here is twofold. One, caring for an aging loved one, a widow in this particular place. She is not physically, mentally, or financially able at this point in time to take care of herself. She can't. She's 91 years old. I have another grandma who's 91 years old and has help from my family, that side of the family, to get her shopping done, to get the places that she needs to go. But she's kind of mostly still living on her own, and she kind of likes, she's okay being alone. This grandma, my grandma, is not. So how do we take care of an elderly loved one and what's appropriate? And I guess somebody who's mentally ill as well. Dementia is a mental illness, and it's exhausting. And she's easy, from what I hear. She is the only dementia patient that I have directly cared for, but she's exhausting. So the first thing that came to mind for me is when Jesus was on the cross, and this is in John chapter 19. So we're going to go to John chapter 19. And John chapter 19 says, where do we start? John 19, 25 through 27. And Jesus is on the cross. Very few are with him as he's hanging there. Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother there, and the disciple whom he loved, that's John, standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son." And to the disciple, "Here is your mother." From that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Into his home. So first of all, what we know about Mary, what we believe to know about Mary, is that she was a very young lady. Very young. And when Jesus was born. So this puts her probably in her late 40s, early 50s, when Jesus is dying, mid-40s even maybe. So not at all elderly. But this says that this disciple took her into his home. What I see, what I read, what I perceive is that he physically is taking care of her. He is an emotional support. He is obviously a financial support. Mary is in his home, his household. So there's that. I'm feeling a little bit convicted to have her in my home, because the disciple who Jesus loved took Jesus's mom into his home. Jesus is taking care of her. But we don't know that Mary had any kind of mental illness or actual physical ailment. We don't know. It doesn't say that. It just says that John took her into his home. So kind of doesn't help. So the other part of my struggle is that I think this is undignified. it's a horrible way to go. And it's not torture, but it is a degrading way to go, a disgraceful way to go. Things that my grandmother does. I don't know about everybody with dementia or Alzheimer's, but things that my grandmother is doing now, she would never have done in her right mind. I am 100% positive about that. She would be mortified to know what she was doing or what was happening to her body. Absolutely mortified. And I will spare her dignity, but it is a sad and pitiful state to live in. And I love her. I'm taking care of her because she's my grandma. I am paying caregivers who are providing one-on-one time. She's not going to get that in a home, an adult family home, a nursing home, a Medicaid home. She's not going to get that. But I'm struggling and I'm fighting with God right now. And my husband, who is not a believer, is having a great struggle with this too. This is